Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of the Brilliant Ones podcast. Got a special guest with me, Jeevan Betigeri, CEO of Fathom Software. Steven, welcome to the Brilliant Ones.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. I'm super excited. You're working on some really great things. I'm super excited to dive into not only Fathom Software, but also Brand Army and Stadium Express. And these are some really cool businesses that you got going on. And but first, before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit more about your background. So I know before we started the show, you told me you've been in Dallas for what, about 19 years?
Yeah, been a while. I came to Dallas as more of an enterprise guy. I was working. I came here to work for Verizon, and I worked for Verizon till like 2011. So, but I was while at Verizon, I was fully on the enterprise side, doing a bunch of CRM stuff. So a lot of enterprise integrations and such, really large scale. Uh, that's where I actually got exposed to writing really big software and doing playing with lots of data and writing big interfaces. So that's been my background, and that's really what got me to Dallas. So
Where'd you go to school?
uh, I did all of my schooling in India.
Okay.
Did all of my schooling there, and then I did my engineering in production in manufacturing, and but my interest in software was always there. I always wanted to be in a realm where no two days are alike. And so software development kind of provided me that avenue towards that. And so while I was in manufacturing for a little bit, um, it always was the software side that I was always interested in. And so that's how my career began. And I began to write. I began to work as a software developer for an ERP manufacturing firm, and they had a very large ERP suite. And so I got to pretty much harness the best of both worlds there, manufacturing, things as well as software development, put them together. And I was kind of responsible for their process production, discrete production modules. And that's how I began to grind my gears in terms of, uh, getting familiar with how software is not just built, but how is it built for industry and such. And so that's how it all began. 2 years into it, I found myself getting interested in the CRM side of things. So I began to realize that my interests had become much more focused. And all this was still in India. And this was 2000, late 1999. And right around that time, there was this massive boom here. This was the dot-com bubble. As a part of that,
.com boom.
yeah, as a part of that, everything was, there was a demand for everything. And so while in Ramco, there was an opportunity for me to move over to the US office and see if I could, work on CRM in much more uh, focused a way than what I was doing earlier. And so, uh, grabbed that opportunity, got here, got to do some good work for PeopleSoft in the Bay Area, and then Hughes Network Systems, and then Waste Management in Houston, and finally made my way to Dallas to come work for Verizon. So that's kind of been my journey thus far. And then since after that, I've been in Dallas all along.
No, nice. And so Dallas is a great place. It's a lot of fast growing companies out here. I'm sure you've seen Dallas grow tremendously over the past 19 years.
It's been remarkable. I mean, when I first came here in 2003, everybody was still trying to recover from the dot-com bubble burst.
Right.
And the economy had just begun to kind of fall back on track. And um, yeah, in many ways, it was an infant. Things were at infancy. And right around that time, I did think about, the thought about entrepreneurship did cross my mind, but things were things hadn't taken off just yet.
Right.
It was only in 2007, 8, and 9 where one began to hear uh, startups and general entrepreneurship a lot more than 2003, and so that kind of began to slowly prime me towards uh, towards thinking of being an entrepreneur full time. And while that was happening, uh, it was not easy to not be affected by all the new wave of tech happening. Web 2.0 was in full swing, and mobile with the iOS 3.0 opening up, uh, you know, with Apple opening up, their app store to third-party developers, certainly changed things substantially. And it was right around that time, 2007, 8, and 9, where all these things happened. The scene in Dallas began to change quite a bit, and so yeah, it's been grown quite a bit. So I've gotten to see it, come a long way now.
Now, you did mention you were in the Bay Area at one point.
Yep.
I mean, I'm assuming back then startups weren't a thing during the time you were out in the Bay Area, right?
I was there during the .com boom.
Right.
So I mean, yes, the startups that were there at that point of time, yeah, I mean, the startup scene in Bay Area in '99 and 2000 was crazy. There were startups galore. I mean, every apartment that you go to, you would hear of one or two startups right in that apartment complex itself. And I was staying in Sunnyvale, which is kind of right in the middle of all of the action. And so had roommates who would have to take a bus to Palo Alto and and Mountain View, and then I had to go to San Jose. It was, I mean, the level of energy was just tremendous, and it was just super exciting times. And everybody I knew uh, were either directly working for a startup or were associated to somebody who's working for a startup. That is how it was up until like October or November of 2000, and that's when I guess the reality began to set in that this may not be a sustainable thing.
Yeah.
And so things began to change after that.
So once you start thinking like an entrepreneur, what were some of your first ventures, or was Fathom your first venture?
Fathom was my first venture, and the way Fathom ended up being my first venture, there's a little bit of a story to it. Again, going back to 2007, 8, and 9, I kind of began to wonder, what is it? I knew that I was enjoying my my enterprise life, no doubt about it.
Right.
I was getting to do big work, a lot of exposure, no complaints. It was fantastic. But like I said, it was impossible to be unaffected by all of the new things happening. I mean, especially the mobile world, the mobile craze. And so I did not want to be left out. I wanted to get on the bandwagon. I wanted to do those exciting things. Exciting in a different way. The enterprise stuff was exciting, but this was like cutting edge, right? You never knew where this thing was headed 2 years, into the progression, or 3 years into the progression. But I wanted to get on it, and so that is how that was the genesis of me trying to figure out my entrepreneurial journey, and so that's how Fathom got started. I spent about 6 months trying to figure out if it made sense for me to get a startup going, and I did have a few startup ideas. But the more I began to think about it, I kept falling back on, as I was growing, my mom, she had a catering business. And one thing I noticed at that point of time was, when she started the business, while we cooked food for everybody else, I realized that the food that we ate ended up being free. It came right from the business, So we didn't have to do anything else to put food on the table. It was a part of the business. And so it quickly dawned on me that if I were to adopt the same approach, instead of me trying to put in all my resources, especially my financial resources, only in one startup, if I were to start a dev shop, I would not only get to work on multiple products for different people and get to learn a ton of stuff that way. This would also allow me to carve out resources where I could have my own startups going in parallel. And instead of me getting one shot, I would probably get more shots, more than one shot at building a startup. And so that led me to actually have a dev shop as opposed to having a startup. So that's the genesis of Fathom.
Wow. So when you first said, okay, now you said I'm going to go do software development, I'm going to start my own software development company. It was just you. Did you say, okay, I'm going to start my software development company, and I could probably offshore it in India, or what was the idea behind? Like, were you going to do most of the projects, or were you going to find a team in India that can build the software and just run the business point of it?
Very fascinating. So glad you asked this. Initially it was just me. I didn't even know where this thing is going to go, and so I realized that being a developer, I needed to be hands-on on whatever I do as an entrepreneur or I do as a company. And so I bought myself a Mac, taught myself Objective-C, and I realized that
what's Objective-C?
Objective-C is, at that point of time, now it's Swift, but at that point of time, Objective-C was what one would use to build iPhone apps, mobile apps,
right,
for the iPhone.
Okay.
And so took me a while to figure it out, but in about a year's time, I built my own app. The purpose of the app was not to get it on the App Store and see if I go get my millions or billions that way. The purpose was to teach myself the core tech, so that I could then figure out what to do with it. Do I take it as a company where I'm still a solopreneur, or do I build it as a formal company out where I have devs working for me? The initial thought was to have a dev office here in Dallas, and I was kind of going in that direction, but serendipity. I just happened to get introduced to a guy back in India, and he was looking for a job. I was looking for someone to help me, because by that time I was getting projects and I was getting an overflow, meaning I was having to turn down projects because I did not have capacity. And so,
and you were just doing all these projects on your own?
I was doing all of it myself, all of the coding. I would work with the clients, work with their designers, get the designs in, build the apps out, push their apps to the App Store. I was doing it all on my own. Wow. I meet this one guy, Vinayak, and he was looking for a change. So I bought him a Mac. I showed him my code. We walked through it. I kind of helped him ramp up and understand how this kind of coding is done. To my great surprise, in about 2 months' time, he and I were hammering code out together.
Wow. And he was back in India?
He was back in India.
Wow.
And I was here. And that's how it started. And that changed some of my my planning. My original plan was, let me build a good prototype, a good demo out, so that I could show it to folks, get a few big names on my resume that, hey, I've done work for these guys, and then leverage that to get even more work. So I did that part. So I got a chance to actually do some work for the Men's Warehouse. I was working with folks who are doing engineering for them, and so got to build apps for the Men's Warehouse. Did some work for Neiman Marcus. So got those names on my resume for sure.
But how you were able to go get the clients you were out still? So you were coding and out selling too at the same time?
Yeah. What I did, I knew it was going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
So when I built my first app up that I wanted to show around to everybody, I built it in a way where folks could get to see the enterprise mindset behind it. I just did not want to build a boutique app. So it, on the face of it, it was a simple game, but behind the scenes, I had actually built the entire architecture needed, where I one could potentially see that this app could be integrated with a large enterprise system. And so that's what I built, and that is what I began to show around. Took me a few months of showing it around, and then eventually, the folks who were doing work for the men's warehouse, they saw it, they connected the dots, and that's how I began to work with them.
Wow. And then everything else just led to more work.
It just
and more work.
more work. It just networking and good work led to more good work.
Right. And so now you got your guy in India.
Yep.
And so now do you think about hiring someone else at this point once you guys kind of get a flow going?
Well, there was another challenge that I ran into at that time. And the challenge was I was getting an overflow of work, but it still wasn't enough for me to mark this effort as sustainable. I would get like one or two leads which would convert into engagements, but there wasn't a pipeline, and I was not becoming successful at establishing a strong pipeline. And so that's where I had to kind of resort to a few growth hacks. So one of the things that worked for me at that point of time was, right now it's called Upwork, but at that time,
I know Upwork.
Yeah,
Upwork is really. I use Upwork in my e-commerce business.
Yep.
And I use Upwork on this podcast actually.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Upwork and how it works.
So earlier it was called Elance.
Yeah.
And I think Elance and one other company, they merged and they became Upwork. So, but in 2010, 11, 12, Elance was kind of the place that you would go to get apps built. And I knew, having realized that I was not able to build a pipeline that was consistent, I realized that the only way to get to a strong pipeline is to have a strong portfolio. It's one thing that's dependent on the other. You can't have a strong portfolio if you don't have a pipeline, and vice versa as well. But you got to break that somewhere, right? So what I did is I went to Elance, and I essentially began to bid on projects which were supposedly meant for offshore developers. But I went in and I essentially bid on them that, hey, I'm based out of US. While I have one guy in India, I can still do this onshore if you guys want, but I will do it at the same prices that everybody else on Elance offers. So I equated myself completely to everybody else around the world. With I did not have any. I did not apply any of the billing, tenets or standards that one from the United States would apply. So none of those billing rates applied, and so suddenly it became a level playing field for me. And plus, since I had done that work for those two big names, it became a lot easy for me to sell that and say that, hey, I've done this big work. I come from an enterprise world, and I'm going to build apps for you at the same price as any other offshore company. Here I am. And then that's how I began to get work. And sometimes, initially it was very small, a simple planner app and a very simple color picking app and such. And then that led to bigger things. But that exercise that exercise as a growth hack really worked. And I ended up getting like 16 or 17 projects that way. And that really made my portfolio very meaty, which led to bigger work.
Right. No. And so what point did you start building out a team, or did you, how did you get more people involved with your development, or do you still do primarily all the development yourself?
I do hands-on dev, but now the team's grown.
Yeah.
And we, at any given point of time, we are if we put the employees and the contractors together, we are between 15 and 20, sometimes a little over 20 as well
Yeah.
in terms of a head count. But the way it started was we were, at that point of time, we were only developing iOS apps. And so it was me and this guy, Vinayak, the two of us. I mean, he and I, we hit it off and we are great buddies. We, I was talking to him literally this morning, for some stuff that he and I are working together. So it's been an amazing collaboration with him. But what ended up happening was we began to work on these projects, and then in a month or so, his friend comes along, and his buddy is looking for work, and so we pull him in. We essentially do the same thing that Vinayak and I did together, rinse and repeat. And that guy the three of us begin to hammer code out.
Yeah.
And then the fourth person comes along, the fifth person comes along. Before we know, we were 6 people. And
all based in India?
All based in India. And I was the only guy here. The modus operandi was still the same. We would all sit and code. And back in India, we actually rented out half of a water cooler room. Literally, half of a water cooler room. We stuck 6 desks there, and that's how we began to work. Daytime I would work, nighttime they would work. I would do all of the requirements, and I would, all of the architecture and design, and then at night we would sit and we would code. It was very challenging. Physically, let alone mentally. Physically, it was really draining me out. I was never used to sleeping for like 2 hours, 3 hours a night. But that was my new life at that point of time.
Right.
And I knew if that model had to work, this level of sacrifice was absolutely needed. And that's how it all started. And that's how the team began to grow.
Gotcha. So are you, for the contractors, are you still using Upwork?
Not anymore. We directly source them. The India office directly sources them now.
Okay.
So we have a set of dedicated full-time employees,
right?
And then we have an overflow of contractors as needed. Most of the times, the contractors now are no longer tech. They are either marketing. The skill is either marketing or UI UX, because now the tech is completely taken care of.
Yeah.
The team, I've been very fortunate to have built a team that is extremely passionate about tech. So that has not been my worry at all the last several years now.
Yeah. So are you utilizing virtual assistants at all?
Virtual assistants, every so often I do, but the way I work, there isn't much room for a virtual assistant. I've toyed with the idea quite a bit.
Yeah.
But especially because of the nature of our engagements.
Right.
They are extremely close, very, very personal engagements. And almost always the clients that come to me because my existing clients refer them out to me. And then the second thing that ends up happening, which also I'm very fortunate about, is we work for a few years, we end up becoming great buddies. And that leads to newer engagements where I end up being a co-founder. Yeah. So it's these kind of relationships.
And so that's I mean to cut you off.
No,
so that's how you got the other. So that's a good transition.
Yeah.
So what was the first startup that you co-found?
The first true startup that I co-founded was I would say was Stadium Express.
Stadium, okay.
Yeah. So there as well, I got to meet Don Eric and Chris and Max, and they had this startup called Menu Runners that was that they had kicked off. Menu Runners was a food delivery startup, and their niche was to do food delivery in tier 3 cities, in the tertiary markets, not the Dallases and not the Austins, but smaller towns, Waxahachie, Lubbock, Midland, and so that was the idea, and it actually worked. So by the time I joined forces with them, They already had a bunch of cities where they were actually delivering food, and they had daisy chained a technology system in place. It was not none of that was custom built. They had just used so many different products to put together the tech that they wanted to work, and they had reached a point where that was hitting its limits, and they needed somebody to come in and build tech for them from the ground up. And that's how I got to know Don Eric. And we began to build. We built the tech for mini runners. Mini runners took off. It began to do really well. But in those 3 years, obviously we kind of got to know each other really, really well. And so we became great buddies. And then there was this new opportunity came Don Eric's way where there was an opportunity to deliver food in seat in stadiums while games were going on. And we initially talked about how could we repurpose some of the tech that we built for menu runners, or do we build something from the ground up? How do we go about doing it? As we begin to think through all of that, that eventually culminated in Stadium Express, and then that's where I got an opportunity to co-found Stadium Express along with Don Eric and Chris and Max.
So, what is Stadium Express?
Stadium Express is an in-seat food delivery platform where, say, you're watching a game either at in Frisco. Say you're watching soccer at the Toyota Stadium, or you're at the Legends watching basketball. You're in seat. There's an app. You either want to order alcoholic beverages or regular food that's out there on the menu. What we did is we built a framework out where they would come in, and many times we would do it on their behalf, where we would actually build out their entire menu of all of the food that's available in all of the stalls at the stadium, and have it displayed within an app. Folks who are watching the game would sit in their seats and order food from the app. And we had a backend console built, actually 2 consoles built, one that was facing the kitchen and one that was facing the runners who would run and deliver food. And then essentially what we did was we built this triangulation. And then the way the triangulation worked was somebody ordered food, the kitchen would get notified, they would prepare the food, there would be runners waiting there, and the runners would get to know exactly, hey, this is the order number, this is the seat, this is the row, this is the section, here is the bag, and they would then run to deliver food. And that's how we went about doing fulfillment. So that is what many runners, that is what Stadium Express really was. And so, yeah, that's the premise of Stadium Express.
Oh, wow. So have you got, is it a QR code that people have to scan, or is it actual app?
It's an app.
That people have to, okay,
Yep.
They have to download.
Yep. They download the app, and luckily for us, Apple's in-app purchase rules did not apply to us because we were actually selling physical commodities.
Right.
So worked great, really.
Yeah. No, that's
COVID did affect us quite a bit. So yeah, Stadium Express, the heyday was certainly prior to COVID.
Yeah. So how'd you get involved with Brand Army?
Same exact thing.
Same exact way.
So
and what is Brand Army?
Brand Army is a fan monetization platform. It's smack in the middle of the creator economy. So the idea is, you may be a successful creator having your own audience elsewhere. Could be TikTok, could be Instagram, YouTube, wherever. But all those sites, all those platforms, they work on a revenue share basis. So you create content, you draw an audience out, they get to serve ads to that audience, and they share their profit with you. There isn't much of a direct way for you to monetize. off of your fan following. Now there are sites like there's for the general audiences you have Patreon, and for the adult audiences you have few other sites like
OnlyFans.
OnlyFans,
Yeah.
yeah, which do exactly the same thing where creators come in and have offerings and monetize off of those offerings.
Right.
Um, Vikram and Ramon, they the way first of all the way we got to know each other was I was roped in by them to build tech for one of their earlier startups called Drive Ads, and it was the idea was to wrap vehicles in vinyl and then track how many people saw that vinyl, and based on that, essentially build an advertising model. But we built the tech, and right then COVID happened, and COVID just decimated it. So it was a hard decision for Vikram and Ramon to take. But Ramon, in his past, has been a photographer, has been a fashion photographer. So he kind of had this idea at the back of his mind. The market was just not ready at that point of time when he had that idea, and so it kind of COVID hitting us in many ways was a boon in disguise. That allowed Vikram and Ramon to reset and really think what is it that they could do next in lieu of Drive Ads. And looking at how the environment was, how the creator economy had shaped up, it was kind of a no-brainer for Ramon to realize, hey, you know what? The idea from a few years ago, I could actually, we could see if we could bring it to life. And so, but by then, we had gotten to know each other quite well. And so Drive Ads kind of dies out, and we are like, hey, let's get Brand Army going. And so that's how Brand Army took off. So we began to work on Brand Army around April of 2020. March of 2021 is when we went into open beta. And yeah, since then we've been, we still consider ourselves to be in beta, even though for all functional purposes, we are a full-fledged, fully working.
So how many influencers you guys have on the platform?
We have around 100, I would say. I cannot recollect the exact number right now, but give or take around 100. And in terms of users, we have had 170,000 users.
170,000 users.
Yep.
Wow. So what's been the strategy to get influencers to use Brand Army?
So the initial idea was to get was to be a general platform, exactly like TikTok or Instagram, and have general creators who cater to a general audience, and reach out to them, have them come over to Brand Army. The idea of Brand Army is very simple. You're the brand, you bring the army. So you bring your army over and you serve them content that you would not serve them elsewhere. And that the idea was to explore monetization avenues off of that. But over a period of time, things changed, and there were a lot of soft pivots along the way in terms of identifying creators that we could help monetize strongly. And so one area that we were able to penetrate pretty well was the WWE wrestlers, where you have all these wrestlers, either their wrestling career is going really well or they're thinking about extending this career into something else. And so a bunch of wrestlers actually came onto the platform, and that helped bring about very dedicated fan following along, towards those wrestlers, and that was a pretty big, I would say, growth area for Brand Army.
Yeah, no, I think Brand Army is a great idea, because what we're seeing today is it is like an influencer world, right? And if those who have influence, can make a lot of money because people want to follow that person, right? People want to see what that person's doing on a day-to-day era, right? People want to be involved in their life. And so it's crazy how times have changed now, because everybody wants to see everything, right? They want to see behind the scenes. They want to see what's going on. And influencers who have the big following can benefit off that because they can put out a candy bar, they can put out makeup, they can put out a t-shirt, a drink, a tequila, right?
Yeah.
And people are going to buy it just because they build their brand up and they can recognize it. And
True.
so that you're going to see it's just going to get more and more known. It's going to get more bigger now as people become more influencers, and now these brands have to rely on the influencer.
True, very true. You actually nailed it. 2010s, 2005 through 10, it was all about you. It was all about a friend graph as to, hey, you are important. Therefore, people connected to you are important, and therefore the network is defined by that. By that norm. That has changed, and then it's no longer. There is still a part about you, but it's not as much you anymore. It's way more about what you do. That's more important than what you are. So it's no longer a friend graph. It's an interest graph now. Everything is driven by interests. And TikTok has milked this like crazy. It's all so if you were to go on TikTok, you are not served content based on people. You are served content based on what kind of actions do you like to see. Do you like to see musicians? Do you like to see performers? Do you like to see cover videos? However it may be, and that is the content that is served to you continuously, and everywhere it's kind of becoming that. And so that is where things went from you as a person are socially popular through to you becoming an influencer, through to you becoming a creator, where you are actually creating stuff, and it is what you're creating is what matters more than what you are as a person, and that is what is driving all of these interest graphs.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's a good time to really be a content creator, right? Even if you're a small business, it's so much power in just creating content because your audience wants to see it. They want to see how the brownies are made, right? They just don't want to eat the brownies. They want to see how the brownies are made, right? They want to see what goes into it. And they also want to see the bloopers behind it. They want to see the staff. They want to see who's laughing and giggling and who showed up to work late. They want to see everything. Can you believe we live in a day and age now where people actually watch people eat?
That has been blowing my mind ever since I first got to know about it.
Yeah.
The way Vikram, Roman and I, the way we heard about it was, that in 2015, 2016, there used to be folks in Korea who pay other people to eat stuff that they cannot eat. And we were like, what a far-fetched concept.
Yeah.
Here we are. Oh, you know what? There is that, and notions have changed. I would actually be taken aback every time we'd go to a restaurant and my daughter would, take her phone out, and instead of trying to eat the food that was served, she would first take a picture. 5 years in, every time I go out to eat, that's the first thing I do.
Yeah.
So we've changed as people as well.
Yeah,
so
right.
To your point, there's probably there never has been a better time for a creator.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As we wrap up, I always like to ask this question. What advice would you give entrepreneurs?
Quite a few things I would say. It's quite a big list, but the first thing is do not treat any effort as the only effort you're going to go after. The adage, fail, learn, grow is absolutely true, and you cannot look at it as a two-dimensional circle. You have to look at it like a slinky. Fail, learn, grow. It is a slinky, and you keep going from one hoop to the other. So that's the first thing I would say. Failing is absolutely not a bad thing. Not only is failing a bad thing, failing is absolutely essential for you to succeed. You cannot learn your lessons the way you do when you fail. Not saying that you should fail, but if you do, it's not a bad thing. So that's the first advice. The second advice I would say is surround yourself with the best advisors that you can. At least twice or thrice, Fathom as a company has gotten saved because of the amazing advice I've gotten from my close buddies. And so make sure that you go out there and you network enough, make good acquaintances, good friends, good mentors who can really give you worthwhile advice that could actually mean the difference between closing your business versus giving it another shot. And then the third thing I would say, there are times when Hail Marys will be needed. Leaps of faith will be needed. You and only you will be in the best position to decide what to do. You could go away, and just flicker out, or you could give it the best you could and flicker out. End of the day, you'd want to have the feeling that you gave it everything. So, and that is what I see as a difference between people who resigned and went back to doing other things versus people who actually succeeded. It was one or more of those leaps of faith. So that's the other thing I would that has helped me, that I'm sure other people should keep at the back of their minds. And the last thing is a safety net. Sometimes it's very hard to figure a safety net at the back of your mind. A lot of folks actually even recommend that you should not have a safety net. If you don't have a plan B, you're going to put all your effort into getting plan A to work. I see that thought process, and I appreciate that thought process. But in today's day and age, for you to be able to maximize the gains from your effort, at least in my case, I always, every time I took a step, every time I had a leap of faith or had to throw a Hail Mary, I was like, what is my plan B if this were to not work? Do not have to spend too much effort exercising it, but at least let there be something back in your mind, so that while you're taking all those risky, you're executing your managed risk, you have this at your back of your mind that, hey, if this were to not work, I have a plan B in place as a detour. So that thing definitely has helped me quite a bit. So those are the things I would say. Any starting entrepreneur would if they would keep this at the back of their minds, that would really help. And then finally, just do it, man. If you have an idea, you will be surrounded by if you meet 100 people, you're going to have 99 people who are probably going to have a conventional line of thought, and they're going to ask you to take the path that is walked upon. But if you think that you want to venture out and do something else, do not hesitate. Just do it.
Nice. No, Jeevan, appreciate it.
Thank you, man. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you had me on your show.
No problem. Thank you.